It is just this truly universal experience. You're sitting there, maybe it's across a boardroom table and you're trying to pitch this high-stakes corporate merger.
Sure.
Or maybe you're just, across the kitchen table trying to convince a family member to take some sort of vital medical intervention seriously.
Yeah, the stakes can be literally anywhere.
Right, exactly. And you have the facts, you have the empirical data, you've basically built this argument that is so logically sound, so thoroughly researched that there's just no room for rational debate.
It's watertight.
Right, it's totally watertight. And you present it fully expecting the other person to look at this undeniable evidence and just, change their mind.
Which is rarely what actually happens.
Exactly. What actually happens is you watch them instantly dig their heels in. Like, they don't just reject your proposal, they actively retreat further into their original position.
Yeah, they double down.
They double down. And the harder you try to convince them, the more entrenched they become. It is so frustrating.
It really is. And, it's a dynamic that plays out millions of times a day.
Yeah.
It actually represents this fundamental flaw in how we intuitively understand human behavior.
How so?
Well, we see this friction everywhere, right? In public health messaging, international diplomacy, complex sales cycles, and obviously in our personal relationships.
Oh, for sure.
And we basically operate on this deeply ingrained, almost Newtonian assumption about human psychology. Like, we assume a body at rest requires an overwhelming external force to move.
So if they aren't moving, we just push harder.
Exactly. If someone isn't moving in the direction we want, our default setting is to think, well, I just haven't applied enough force.
Right, I need more slides.
Right. I need a thicker dossier of statistics or, a louder voice or a more aggressive ad campaign.
Or a more dire warning.
Yeah. But what we chronically fail to realize is that the application of force is actually the exact variable generating the resistance.
Wow. Okay, and that moment, hitting that brick wall, that is exactly what we are dissecting today. So welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we are exploring this really fascinating psychological framework, and it's all centered around this concept of becoming a catalyst.
Yes, the catalyst approach.
Right. And our mission today for you, the listener, is to completely deconstruct and basically rebuild your mental model of persuasion.
It's a total paradigm shift.
It really is.
Yeah.
We want to move away from this instinct to act like a bulldozer, someone trying to just level opposition through sheer rhetorical force, and instead understand these invisible mechanics of resistance.
Right, because to genuinely influence others, to actually facilitate real shifts in belief, we have to stop adding pressure.
Stop pushing.
Stop pushing. We need to redirect our energy away from generating force and focus entirely on diagnosing and removing the barriers that are holding the person back.
Which makes so much sense when you actually think about it.
It does. It's really an exercise in identifying psychological friction and just clearing the path rather than trying to drag someone down it against their will.
Okay, let's ground this in a physical analogy because I think this helps visualize it. Imagine you have this heavy vehicle parked on a really steep incline, and the parking brake is pulled all the way up. It's locked tight.
Okay, parking brake is on.
Right. So traditional persuasion, which is basically what we're all taught in debate club or business school, is essentially standing behind that heavy vehicle and pushing it up the hill with all your physical might.
Which is exhausting.
It's totally exhausting. And when it refuses to move, your instinct is just to recruit 3 colleagues to help you push harder.
Right. Bring in more force.
Exactly. You are expending massive amounts of energy, you're sweating, and the tires are literally just skidding on the asphalt.
Going nowhere.
Going nowhere. Now, the catalyst approach, it abandons the pushing entirely. It suggests just walking around to the driver's side, opening the door, sitting in the cabin, and simply disengaging the parking brake.
I love that analogy. It's a remarkably precise visualization of the cognitive framework we're looking at today.
Right, because it's not about force.
Not at all. The human mind actually processes psychological pressure in a way that mimics how physical objects process kinetic energy.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, when we look at the neuroscience of persuasion, we see this aggressive defense mechanism. The second you apply external pressure to someone's established beliefs, their cognitive architecture automatically generates an equal and opposite resistance.
So pushing literally causes the pushback.
Exactly. The fundamental paradox here is that the more aggressively you try to persuade, the more you signal to the recipient's brain that they are being coerced.
And people hate being coerced.
Oh, we despise it. The human brain has incredibly robust evolutionary defenses against coercion.
Okay, so to understand how to release this cognitive parking brake, we really need to examine the anatomy of that resistance. And the primary directive here from this source material is remarkably blunt. It's just stop pushing.
Stop pushing.
The assertion is that pushing isn't just an inefficient strategy, it is actively counterproductive. But, I mean, I have to play devil's advocate here right out of the gate.
Go for it.
We see forceful pushing work all the time, especially in hierarchical environments,
Okay, like where?
like a corporate setting. Say a CEO mandates a return to office policy. They send an email saying, everyone is back at their desks 5 days a week starting Monday, or you're fired.
That's definitely a massive push.
Right, that is the ultimate push. And come Monday morning, the parking lot is full. So, didn't the push achieve the exact desired result?
Well, that's the perfect stress test for this theory, because it really forces us to draw a sharp line between forced compliance and genuine behavioral change.
Okay, compliance versus change.
Exactly. Did the executive achieve compliance? Unquestionably. When you introduce the threat of severe consequences like losing your job, people will absolutely alter their immediate behavior to avoid the penalty.
Because they have bills to pay.
Right. But if we look at what a catalyst is actually trying to achieve, the executive hasn't changed a single mind. They have merely constrained the employee's available choices.
Ah, I see.
So the critical question becomes, what happens to the underlying ecosystem of that company? What is the unseen cost of forcing that compliance?
Oh, I would imagine the invisible cost is massive.
Massive.
Like, you get malicious compliance. Sure, the employees show up, but they do the absolute bare minimum.
Exactly. They are physically present, but entirely disengaged.
Right. They spend half the day complaining on Slack, morale just completely plummets, and your top performers, the ones who can easily find new jobs, they start updating your resumes.
Spot on. The physical bodies are in the building, but the intellectual capital is literally walking out the door.
Wow. So the push works on the surface but destroys everything underneath.
Precisely. Forced compliance creates this severe hangover. It breeds deep resentment and it just destroys trust. True, sustainable change requires identifying the underlying barriers that made the employees want to work remotely in the first place.
Right, like why did they prefer it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
When an executive just relies on a mandate, they are completely ignoring the employee's fear of lost productivity, they're ignoring the friction of the commute, and they are ignoring the deep comfort the employee has developed with their routine.
So a catalyst doesn't just want a body in a chair.
No, a catalyst wants an engaged, motivated individual who actually understands and embraces the shared mission. And you simply cannot generate internal motivation through external coercion.
That makes a ton of sense. And I want you, the listener, to run this through your own personal experience for a second.
It's a great exercise.
Think of a scenario where someone presented you with an objectively excellent idea. Maybe a colleague suggested a better workflow, or a partner suggested a smart financial strategy.
But the delivery was off.
Right, because of how they delivered it. Maybe they were condescending, or they framed it as a demand, or they just kept harping on it endlessly.
Oh, yeah.
And you immediately rejected the proposal. You turned down a legitimately good concept entirely because the sheer force of the push triggered your internal defenses.
We are all so susceptible to this. And it leads us directly into the diagnostic tools we need to identify what those defenses actually are.
Right, if we can't push, what do we do?
If pushing is off the table, we need a framework to categorize and dismantle these psychological barriers. The source breaks these barriers down into 5 core areas.
And the acronym is REDUCE, right?
Yes. It stands for reactance, endowment, distance, uncertainty, and corroborating evidence.
REDC.
Exactly. And the first of these internal defenses, reactance, is arguably the most volatile of them all.
Reactance is so fascinating to me because it feels deeply biological. It's basically defined as that immediate reflexive resistance people exhibit when they feel their freedom is being restricted.
Yes.
It operates almost like a subconscious anti-persuasion radar.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
It's a foundational concept in behavioral psychology. It was actually formalized by Jack Brem back in the 1960s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, reactance theory basically posits that human beings possess this fundamental non-negotiable need for autonomy. We need control over our own environment and our choices.
So when someone threatens that...
Exactly. When you instruct someone that they must adopt a certain belief or they cannot do a certain behavior, their brain doesn't register that as helpful data. It registers it as a direct threat to their autonomy.
Right. It's like, who are you to tell me what to do?
Yes. The brain perceives a deficit of freedom, and its immediate overriding priority is just to restore that freedom.
And how does it do that?
Well, the most efficient way to restore agency is to do the exact opposite of whatever was demanded.
That is so stubborn, but so true.
The logic or the benefit of your request becomes entirely irrelevant. The rejection is purely a defense of the self.
Okay, let's look at how this plays out on a massive scale, because I think public health campaigns historically provide some of the clearest examples of reactants completely backfiring.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about the old approach to anti-smoking campaigns. For decades, it was just heavy-handed moralizing. The message was essentially, smoking is idiotic, it will kill you, and you must stop immediately.
And the data from those early campaigns was incredibly revealing.
Because they didn't work, right?
Worse than not working. Studies demonstrated that those highly aggressive, patronizing messages actually increased the desire to smoke.
Wait, increased?
Yes, particularly among teenagers and young adults. The heavy-handed push generated massive reactance. The target audience felt they were being lectured to by out-of-touch authority figures.
So they rebelled.
Exactly. They lit a cigarette, not because they misunderstood the health risks, but literally to prove they still possess the agency to make their own decisions, even if those decisions were destructive.
Wow, they were just reclaiming their autonomy.
Reclaiming autonomy.
So how did the successful campaigns eventually bypass this? Because obviously smoking rates did eventually plummet.
Right, they did.
You can't just stop telling people smoking is dangerous. If the threat is real, how do you communicate it without triggering that reactance reflex?
Well, you have to fundamentally alter the architecture of the message. You still provide the stark reality, but you meticulously preserve the audience's sense of agency.
Okay, how did they do that?
The paradigm shift occurred with campaigns like the Truth Initiative in the late 90s and early 2000s. Instead of telling teenagers what to do, they simply presented raw, unvarnished facts about how tobacco executives were manipulating chemical formulations to ensure addiction.
Oh, wow. They exposed the internal memos.
Exactly. They just showed the teens what the companies were doing behind closed doors.
That is absolutely brilliant, because they redirected the reactants. Instead of the teenager feeling controlled by health experts, the campaign made them realize they were actually being controlled by tobacco companies.
You nailed it. The campaign essentially said, look, these executives view you as a replacement demographic for their dying customers. They are manipulating you for profit.
And then what?
Then they basically said, what you do with that information is entirely up to you.
They didn't issue a mandate.
No mandate. They offered a choice. Continue being manipulated by a massive corporation or rebel against that manipulation by quitting.
And when the individual feels like they are the author of the choice, the reactance dissolves.
Exactly. Because they aren't submitting to your will, they were exercising their own.
That concept, just letting them be the author of the choice, it's incredibly powerful in a corporate setting too, isn't it?
Oh, without a doubt.
Like if you're a manager rolling out a new initiative, if you present it as a finalized mandate, it triggers reactance immediately.
Right. People feel boxed in.
But if you present the overarching problem to your team and say, hey, we need to improve our delivery times by 15%. Here are 2 potential frameworks we could adopt.
Yes, offering options.
Right. And you say, I want your input on which one fits our workflow better. You are still guiding the parameters, but the team selects the path.
Yes. You are shifting the dynamic from a monologue to a collaborative negotiation. And once you successfully navigate past that immediate defensive wall of reactance, you generally encounter the second major internal defense mechanism.
Which brings us to the E in redisuse. Endowment.
Yep.
And endowment is this massive structural barrier. It's basically the psychological reality that people place a significantly higher value on what they already have, simply by virtue of possessing it.
Exactly. We value our current systems, our current beliefs, and our current habits disproportionately.
Just because they are ours.
Right. It's heavily rooted in behavioral economics. Specifically, the endowment effect and the concept of loss aversion, which was developed by Kahneman and Tversky.
Loss aversion is huge.
It is. Human neurology is basically wired to feel the pain of a loss approximately twice as acutely as we experience the pleasure of an equivalent gain.
Wait, twice as much?
Twice as much. So when you approach someone and propose a change, even a highly beneficial change, you are fundamentally asking them to surrender their current state.
You are asking them to give up their endowment.
Exactly. And even if their current situation is deeply flawed, abandoning it registers in the brain as a loss.
This explains so many baffling corporate technology decisions. I mean, think about a massive company relying on a legacy software system that was built 20 years ago.
Oh, we've all seen this.
Right. It crashes constantly. The user interface is completely unintuitive, and it requires all this manual data entry that wastes thousands of hours a year.
It's objectively terrible.
It's terrible. But when the IT department finally proposes migrating to a sleek, automated, cloud-based platform, the employees practically riot.
They fight tooth and nail.
They fight viciously to retain the terrible software, and it's literally just because they know where the buttons are.
Yep.
They've built their own little idiosyncratic workarounds. It might be a terrible system, but it is their terrible system.
That is a classic manifestation of the endowment effect.
Well,
And the critical takeaway for anyone trying to drive change is that you have to understand the mathematics of that resistance.
the mathematics.
Yes. Because of loss aversion, the new alternative you are pitching cannot merely be 10 or 20% better than the status quo.
Because that's not enough to overcome the pain of losing the old way.
Exactly. If the new software is only marginally more efficient, that slight gain is not mathematically sufficient to outweigh the intense psychological pain of abandoning their familiar routine.
So it has to be a huge upgrade.
The new proposition has to be overwhelmingly, undeniably superior to even begin to counter the gravity of the endowment.
And this is where so many pitches fail. The person proposing the change spends 100% of their energy talking about the shiny new features of the future.
You show all the graphs.
Right, the graphs of how great things will be, but they are completely ignoring the anchor dragging behind the boat. They aren't addressing the perceived value of the present.
Which is a fatal flaw. To release that specific mechanism of the parking brake, a catalyst has to redirect focus. You have to move away from the benefits of the future and highlight the hidden, unacknowledged costs of the present.
You have to show them the present isn't actually that great.
Exactly. You have to gently guide the individual to realize that their status quo is not nearly as safe or comfortable as they assume.
Let's look at a massive retail failure that illustrates this perfectly.
Okay.
The JCPenney pricing disaster from about a decade ago.
This is a great example.
So they brought in this highly successful executive, Ron Johnson, and he was the guy who pioneered the Apple Store concept.
Right, a retail genius.
Supposedly. And his logic, when he got to JCPenney, was mathematically sound. They were constantly running these fake sales, like marking a shirt up to $60 just to put it on sale for $30 with a coupon.
Which is exhausting for the consumer.
Right. So Johnson said, this is inefficient and insulting to the consumer. Let's just price the shirt at an honest $30 every day.
No more coupons.
No more coupons, no more games, fair and square pricing. Objectively, it was a more transparent, streamlined system.
But he profoundly misunderstood the endowment effect.
Completely.
The core JCPenney shopper felt endowed to the thrill of the hunt. They felt ownership over the process of clipping that coupon and basically beating the system to secure the deal.
The coupon was their endowment.
Exactly. When Johnson replaced that complex game with a flat, honest price, he took away their endowment.
And they hated it.
He despised it. The objective math didn't matter at all. The psychological loss was devastating. The customers felt robbed of their agency and their routine.
And they just abandoned the store in droves.
Yep.
Sales absolutely plummeted.
It is a chilling reminder that logic rarely defeats endowment. You really have to help them voluntarily let go.
Okay, so assuming we have stopped pushing, we have bypassed reactance by preserving autonomy, and we've loosened the grip of endowment by exposing those hidden costs of the status quo.
We are making progress.
We are. But now we encounter the structural barriers of the change itself, just the sheer size and ambiguity of what we are asking for.
Right.
And this introduces the D and the U in RBDC, distance and uncertainty. Let's examine distance first.
So distance refers to the cognitive gap between an individual's current coordinate, meaning their existing beliefs or behaviors, and the new coordinate you are asking them to occupy.
Okay, the gap between where they are and where you want them to be.
Exactly. In behavioral economics, we talk about the zone of acceptance and the zone of rejection.
Which means?
If you propose an idea that aligns relatively closely with their current worldview, it falls within their zone of acceptance. They're willing to at least entertain it.
Because it's not too crazy.
Right. However, if you propose a massive radical shift that lands deep in their zone of rejection, the distance is simply too vast.
It's too far elite.
It feels alien, unrealistic, and deeply threatening. They won't even engage with the premise. They'll just dismiss it outright.
Let's apply this to a complex negotiation, maybe like a corporate merger.
Okay.
Say Company A is acquiring Company B, and Company A's leadership walks into the very first integration meeting and says, "Welcome to the family. By the end of this quarter, you will abandon your entire corporate culture, adopt our reporting structure, use our proprietary software, and rebrand all your client-facing material."
Oh boy. The distance there is
Well,
astronomical.
right. The employees of Company B are instantly plunged into the zone of rejection. They are going to fight every single mandate.
That is precisely why the methodology dictates that we must shrink the change.
Shrink the change. I like that.
And the distance is too vast. You do not stand at the finish line and demand they sprint the entire distance all at once.
You have to break it down.
You must break the monumental shift down into localized, manageable, incremental steps. You shrink the distance so that the initial request falls safely within their zone of acceptance.
So how would Company A actually execute that? How do you shrink a multi-billion-dollar merger?
You focus relentlessly on the most immediate, low-friction next step, deliberately ignoring the final destination for the time being.
Okay, so no talking about the rebrand yet.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Company A shouldn't demand a total culture shift on day one. They should say, for this first month, the only thing changing is the system we use to process expense reports. Everything else remains exactly as you are used to.
Let's just integrate this one minor administrative function.
Exactly. That is a micro-commitment. It falls well within the zone of acceptance. And here is the crucial psychological mechanism behind it.
Okay, what is it?
Once they successfully navigate that small change, their baseline shifts. Their starting coordinate actually moves.
Oh.
So by month 2, the distance to integrating the new CRM software doesn't feel quite as vast because they have already proven to themselves that they can adapt to the new company's systems in a small way.
That is so smart. And shrinking the change doesn't merely solve the problem of distance. It acts as a direct antidote to the next barrier, which is uncertainty.
Yes, the U in Oridice.
Right. We possess this profound evolutionary fear of the unknown. Like for early humans, the unknown wasn't an exciting opportunity, it was a lethal threat.
Absolutely. A rustle in the bushes that you didn't recognize was likely a predator.
Right, so we are biologically wired to cling to a mediocre certainty over a potentially fantastic uncertainty.
Every significant change introduces a massive variable of risk.
Like, will this new corporate structure make my role obsolete?
Or will this new medical treatment cause debilitating side effects? Will adopting this new political stance alienate my community?
When uncertainty is high, that cognitive parking brake locks up tight.
It does. Shrinking the change mitigates this uncertainty by radically lowering the stakes. When you ask for a small trial or a pilot program or a temporary test run, you are engineering a low-risk environment.
You are letting them test the waters.
Exactly. You are allowing the individual to experience a localized version of the new reality without demanding a permanent, irreversible commitment.
This is basically the entire foundation of the modern software as a service industry, isn't it?
Oh, completely.
The whole freemium model. If a company wants you to adopt a complex, expensive project management suite, they don't ask you to sign a 5-year, $100,000 enterprise contract on day one.
The uncertainty of whether the software will actually fit your team's workflow is just too high.
Way too high. So instead they say, here's a free version for up to 5 users. Use it for a month. No credit card required.
Exactly. They shrink the change down to a 5-minute account creation. And watch how elegantly this dismantles the barriers we've discussed so far.
Oh, let's break that down.
First, they avoid reactance because you were choosing to try it, not being forced.
Right.
Second, they weaken endowment because you actually get to experience how much better their platform is compared to your messy spreadsheets.
Which exposes the hidden costs of the status quo.
Exactly. Third, they close the distance by only asking you to use it for one small project initially.
And fourth,
They remove the uncertainty by letting you test the mechanics yourself with absolutely zero financial risk. It is a systematic, sequential release of the resistance mechanisms.
that is a brilliant way to frame it. Okay, so this framework is incredibly robust, but let's look at the final barrier.
The C in READY-DE.
Right. We have navigated reactance, endowment, distance, and uncertainty. We've shrunk the change and offered a low-risk trial. But there are still scenarios where people hesitate.
Always.
The final piece of the puzzle addresses this deep human need for external validation. And this introduces the concept of corroborating evidence, and specifically the vital role of social proof.
This is a really critical juncture. Because even when a change is rendered small and relatively risk-free, human beings still require assurance that the new trajectory is fundamentally viable.
We want to know we aren't crazy for trying it.
Exactly. We need proof that we are not the only ones taking this risk. When a belief is deeply entrenched or a behavior has been practiced for decades, a single source of information, no matter how authoritative, is rarely enough to dislodge it.
So one expert isn't enough.
Right. If you are the lone voice advocating for a radical shift, the listener's brain easily dismisses you as an anomaly. Or they just assume you are biased or misinformed.
Let me challenge this, though, because it sounds like we might be contradicting our very first premise.
Okay, how so?
The first rule was stop pushing. We established that dumping data and facts on someone triggers resistance. But now, by requiring corroborating evidence, aren't we just finding a fancier term for pushing a mountain of facts onto their desk?
That is a totally fair question.
How does providing extensive evidence not devolve back into the bulldozer method?
Well, that is a vital distinction to make, and it hinges entirely on the nature of the evidence and the method of delivery.
Okay.
Pushing is fundamentally adversarial. It is an argument at someone. It involves you, acting as the opponent, hurling theoretical statistics across the table to prove their worldview incorrect.
Which triggers the parking brake.
Instantly. Corroborating evidence, particularly when deployed as social proof, operates on a completely different psychological wavelength.
How is it different?
It involves presenting observable examples of other individuals who have already navigated the change successfully. It shifts the interaction from a theoretical, confrontational debate to an objective, observable reality.
Oh, I see.
You are not pushing them toward a conclusion. You are simply illuminating a path that others have already safely traveled.
So it's the distinction between me aggressively arguing that a new restaurant has the best culinary techniques in the city versus you simply driving by and seeing a line of enthusiastic patrons stretching around the block.
Yes. Perfect analogy. The physical line of people isn't arguing with you. It isn't threatening your autonomy.
Right. The line isn't saying, you must eat here or you're an idiot.
Exactly. It is simply radiating passive, undeniable proof of value.
And we are profoundly social creatures, so that works.
Deeply social. In environments characterized by high uncertainty, we instinctively look to our peer groups, our tribes, to calibrate our own behavior and assess risk.
We want to see what everyone else is doing.
Right. So if you are attempting to facilitate a change, identifying someone who closely mirrors your target, someone they identify with culturally or professionally who has already embraced the new concept, that is invaluable.
This actually addresses what we might call the translation problem in influence,
Yeah.
right?
Elaborate on that.
Well, if a highly technical software engineer tells a marketing director that a new data analytics platform is incredibly intuitive, the marketing director immediately discounts the testimony.
Because they don't share the same baseline.
Exactly. The marketing director thinks, of course it's intuitive to you. You write code for a living. I don't. So the engineer's expertise actually disqualifies them as a source of social proof.
Yes, that is exactly what happens. The source of the evidence matters just as much as the evidence itself.
So how do you overcome that?
To overcome the translation problem, the marketing director doesn't need to hear from the engineer. They need to hear from another marketing director at a similar firm.
A peer.
Yes, a peer who says, look, I was terrified of this platform. I am terrible with data, but the system actually saved me 4 hours of work this week. That peer testimony completely neutralizes the social and professional risk.
There is a classic sociological study that perfectly illustrates this, isn't there? The research on how agricultural innovations spread.
Oh, yes. You are referring to the foundational work by Ryan and Gross in the 1940s.
Right.
They studied the diffusion of hybrid seed corn among farmers in Iowa. It is an absolute masterpiece of observing social proof in action.
Walk us through it.
So, the hybrid corn was objectively superior. It yielded 20% more crop, and it was vastly more resistant to drought.
It was a no-brainer.
Right. But the government and these agricultural salesmen spent years just blanketing the state with data, white papers, and aggressive sales pitches.
They used the bulldozer method. They just pushed the facts.
And it largely failed. The farmers were deeply endowed to their traditional seed, and the distance to adopting a strange, laboratory-created hybrid was just too vast.
And the data dumps triggered massive reactives.
Exactly. So how did the hybrid corn eventually take over the entire state? It wasn't the salesman. It happened because one or two innovative farmers in a community decided to run a micro-experiment,
Shrinking the change.
shrinking the change. They planted the hybrid seed on just a tiny fraction of their acreage.
And when harvest time came,
When harvest time came, the neighboring farmers could physically see that the small plot yielded taller, healthier corn.
they didn't read a white paper, they literally just looked over the fence.
Exactly. They saw a peer, someone who faced the exact same weather, the exact same soil conditions, and the exact same financial risks, succeeding with the new method.
The social proof corroborated the initial claims, completely bypassing those defensive barriers.
Yes, and once a critical mass of neighbors adopted the seed, the social proof became overwhelming, and the holdouts rapidly assimilated.
That dynamic is identically replicated in modern business.
Oh, constantly.
If you want to roll out that new analytics platform to the marketing team, you don't mandate it from the C-suite. You find the most respected, maybe slightly skeptical mid-level manager.
Yes, the opinion leader.
You get them to run a small pilot program on one campaign, and when they inevitably present better ROI metrics at the monthly review, the rest of the team will naturally demand access to the platform.
Because the corroborating evidence does all the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah.
It's a masterclass in elegant influence.
It really is. Okay, but as we synthesize this entire methodology, we really have to acknowledge a sobering reality. You can perfectly execute the diagnosis, you can bypass reactants, expose endowment, shrink the distance, mitigate uncertainty, and provide unassailable social proof.
You can do everything right on paper.
Right. But the entire architecture will collapse if it is not built upon a foundation of trust and executed with immense patience.
That is so true. Those are the intangible variables that dictate whether the mechanical framework actually functions in the real world.
Let's look at trust first. The premise is that people only allow themselves to change when they feel fundamentally safe and deeply understood.
Psychological safety is everything.
Right. If that underlying trust is absent, won't every technique we just discussed simply be perceived as sophisticated manipulation?
Absolutely. The human brain is highly attuned to detecting manipulation. If an individual suspects your underlying intentions are purely self-serving, or if they feel you're just deploying psychological tricks to force their compliance,
Their reactants will flare up.
with tenfold intensity. Trust is the essential lubricant that prevents the friction of change from basically sparking a fire.
But how do you manufacture that trust, especially in a competitive environment or a strained relationship? It feels like a paradox, like, I need to convince you that your worldview is flawed, but first, I need you to trust that I respect you unconditionally.
Well, the key is that it cannot be manufactured. It must be demonstrated through profound, active empathy.
Active empathy.
Yes. It requires approaching the interaction not as an adversary attempting to win a zero-sum debate, but as a collaborator attempting to solve a mutual puzzle.
So no debating.
Building trust mandates that you listen, genuinely listen to their fears and their attachment to their endowment without a hint of judgment.
Give me an example of what that sounds like in practice.
Okay, when an employee pushes back against a new initiative, a bulldozer says, "You are missing the big picture. This is the future. Get on board."
Right. Dismissive.
But a catalyst says, "I hear your hesitation, and I know how heavily you rely on the current workflow. Tell me exactly what worries you about this transition. What aspects of the old system do we absolutely need to ensure we don't lose?"
Wow. You are completely validating their reality.
Exactly. When a person feels truly seen and their concerns are legitimized, their defensive posture naturally relaxes. They feel cognitively safe.
And psychological safety is the absolute prerequisite for vulnerability and change.
Unquestionably.
Which brings us to the final and, frankly, the most agonizing component of this entire philosophy: patience.
Yes, patience.
The reality is that genuine change operates on a timeline that rarely aligns with our desires, and I will confess, this is where I struggle the most.
You're definitely not alone in that.
When I have synthesized the data, when I can vividly see how much better a situation could be if a team or a loved one would just make the pivot, being told to be patient is infuriating.
It really is.
We live in a culture obsessed with life hacks, optimization, and instant gratification. We basically expect a single, perfectly crafted conversation to instantly rewire someone's deeply held philosophy.
And it doesn't work that way.
Watching someone slowly, cautiously tiptoe through their zone of acceptance feels like torture.
It is deeply counterintuitive to our modern conditioning. We want to operate like software engineers, assuming we can just push an update and the human hardware will instantly run the new code.
But we aren't computers.
No. Cognitive architecture does not function like a hard drive. It functions like a biological ecosystem.
That's a great distinction.
Habits, beliefs, and worldviews are not abstract concepts. They're deeply grooved neural pathways in the brain that have been reinforced over years, sometimes decades, of repeated behavior and confirmation bias.
Wow, decades of reinforcement.
Right. And neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to rewire itself, is a physical process. And physical processes require literal time. You cannot demand an ecosystem to adapt overnight.
So if the bulldozer is the wrong metaphor and the software engineer is the wrong metaphor, how should we conceptualize our role in this process over the long term?
You have to view your role as that of a facilitator, a guide who prepares the environment. You are engaged in the meticulous work of clearing the path.
So building trust is preparing the foundation.
Yes. Bypassing reactance and endowment is clearing the debris. Shrinking the change is laying down the stepping stones. Providing social proof is lighting the path.
But ultimately, you must stop at the threshold.
You can clear the road, but you can't drive the car for them.
That is the ultimate test of a catalyst's discipline, isn't it?
It is. You have released the parking brake. But you must possess the humility to step back and allow the individual to place their own foot on the accelerator.
And if you lose your patience,
If you reach across the console and try to press the gas pedal for them, you have instantly reverted to pushing. The autonomy is threatened, the reactance returns, the brake slams back down, and you lose all the progress you've made.
wow.
Patience is the profound recognition that genuine, sustainable change is an internal realization, never an external imposition.
That is a staggering shift in perspective. It fundamentally alters the cadence and the texture of how we interact with the world around us.
It really changes everything.
Let's briefly retrace the architecture of what we've built today.
Good idea.
We began by acknowledging that our default instinct, pushing harder, is a cognitive trap. Applying pressure actively generates the very friction that halts progress.
So we have to stop pushing.
Right. To influence effectively, we must transition from applying force to removing barriers. We explored the internal defenses, how to sidestep reactance by preserving a person's agency and offering choices.
And how to unearth the endowment effect by illuminating the hidden costs of their cherished status quo.
From there, we tackled the structural barriers of the change itself. We learned to close the distance and mitigate uncertainty by shrinking massive, terrifying leaps into small, localized, low-risk experiments.
The micro-commitments.
Exactly. We examined the necessity of corroborating evidence, utilizing the quiet, undeniable power of social proof to show rather than tell.
Looking over the fence.
Right. And finally, we recognize that this entire intricate machinery only functions when it's submerged in genuine, empathetic trust, and given the immense patience required for the human brain to physically rewire itself.
It is a comprehensive and deeply respectful methodology for human interaction.
It is. But before we conclude this deep dive, there is one final, crucial application of this framework that we really must consider.
Oh, yes. The hardest part.
Throughout this conversation, we have directed this diagnostic lens outward. We have strategized on how to become a catalyst to dismantle the barriers preventing other people from evolving.
But true mastery of this concept requires turning that highly calibrated lens inward.
Yes. Take a moment and isolate one of your own deeply entrenched beliefs. It could be a rigid political stance, a dogmatic professional philosophy, or just an interpersonal habit you refuse to break.
We all have them.
Now, subject yourself to the framework. What specific barriers are currently protecting your mind? Are you clinging to that worldview because you have rigorously tested it and found it to be objectively, undeniably true?
Or is it possible you're simply suffering from a massive endowment effect?
Right. Are you holding on to that belief merely because it is comfortable, familiar, and provides a sense of identity?
When confronted with contradictory data, are you rejecting it based on its merits? Or is your reactance flaring up because you just hate feeling wrong?
Becoming a genuine catalyst in the world demands the uncomfortable realization that the parking brake isn't just a mechanism locked inside other people's minds. It is often pulled tight within our own.
That is a brilliant and really challenging thought to leave on. The most difficult, heavily fortified mind you will ever have to change is inevitably the one inside your own head.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly expansive deep dive into the mechanics of influence and the art of becoming a catalyst.
It's been a great conversation.
The next time you find yourself at that boardroom table or in that tense kitchen conversation, feeling the overwhelming urge to bulldoze your way to a consensus, remember the heavy car parked on the hill.
Stop exhausting yourself.
Stop arguing, stop pushing, take a breath, walk around to the driver's side, and simply look for the parking brake. We will see you on the next deep dive.